The iron gate groaned as Marcus pushed it open, the sound echoing across the empty plaza. He stopped, adjusting the grip on his two battered bags. They were heavy, pulling at his shoulders, but the weight of the basketball tucked under his arm felt far more significant. The campus was still waking up. The morning air was thin and sharp against his lungs. He walked to the center of the path and stood there, surrounded by limestone buildings that seemed to stretch toward the clouds. He looked toward the distant gym, a structure he had studied on maps for months. No one was around to witness his arrival. No cameras, no crowd, just the wind rushing through the trees. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, letting the silence settle around him. He felt the rough texture of the ball against his palm, his knuckles white with tension. He leaned forward, his voice barely a murmur in the vast, open space. "I will play in the NBA," he whispered. The words did not echo. They hit the cold air and disappeared, but the intent remained. He shifted his bags and began the walk toward the gym, his pace steady, his eyes fixed on the entrance ahead. The gym doors swung open with a hollow metallic clang. Marcus stepped inside, and the temperature dropped instantly. The space was cavernous, a vast expanse of polished hardwood reflecting the dim light from the high windows. The air held a sharp, chemical sting, the scent of fresh floor wax that clung to the back of his throat. He set his bags down near the bleachers, the sound of the zippers echoing against the rafters. He took a steadying breath, feeling the cold seep through his skin. He walked to the center of the court, the soles of his shoes squeaking against the surface. He looked up at the rim, a singular, unmoving goal in the silence. Later that night, in the cramped quiet of his room, he reached for a scrap of paper and a pen. His hand did not shake. He wrote the words down, pressing hard enough to leave an indentation on the desk beneath. He walked to the wall above his bed, cleared a space, and pressed the note firmly into place. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. He stepped back, read the line once, then twice. The room was dark, but the promise was clear. He climbed into his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind already calculating the hours until dawn. The season started with the sharp blast of a whistle. Marcus sat on the edge of the bench, his knees tucked inward to avoid the passing players. The court was a blur of motion, a chaotic symphony of sneakers grinding against the floor and the rhythmic thud of the ball. He followed the play with his eyes, tracking every pass and every drive, but his hands remained idle on his lap. Beside him, the coach barked instructions at the starters, his voice cutting through the roar of the crowd. Marcus waited for the signal, his heart thumping against his ribs. But the coach looked past him. He watched the minutes tick away on the scoreboard, each one a sharp reminder of his own absence from the game. He shifted his weight on the cold, hard metal of the bench, feeling the vibration of the floor through his feet. He was a spectator, trapped behind a wall of sweat and adrenaline that he was not permitted to breach. The game ended with a buzzer, and he stood up, his muscles stiff from long hours of inactivity. He walked to the locker room, his head down, the weight of the bench time pressing harder on his shoulders than any workout ever had. He was there, yet he was nowhere at all. The locker room emptied in a rush of heavy doors and loud, echoing laughter. Marcus lingered by his locker, pulling his bag tight against his side. He watched his teammates stream out toward the parking lot, their voices carrying through the open hallway, spilling out into the cool night air. They were heading to a party, the promise of music and noise trailing behind them like a wake. Marcus did not follow. He waited until the final pair of footsteps faded into the distance. Then, he turned in the opposite direction. The hallway grew darker as he moved, the fluorescent lights flickering with a low, dying hum. He reached the gym entrance and pushed the heavy door open. Inside, the darkness was absolute, save for the sliver of moonlight cutting across the center circle. He walked to the middle of the floor, the sound of his own breathing loud in the vacuum. He pulled the ball from his bag, the leather cool and textured against his palms. He didn't turn on the main banks of lights. He didn't need them. He stood alone in the center of the court, the distant, faint bass of a party muffled by the thick brick walls, and began to shoot. One ball, one rim, one repetitive, focused motion. The rhythm took over. Squeak, pivot, squeak, slide. The sound of rubber against the polished floor became a metronome for the night. Marcus moved through the zones, his body learning the geometry of the court through thousands of repetitions. He didn't look at the clock. He didn't look at the doors. He looked only at the rim. Each time his feet hit the hardwood, the sound echoed upward, filling the rafters with a sharp, percussive pulse. The air in the gym grew thick with the scent of floor wax and the static of his own movement. He drove left, planted, and rotated. Squeak. The friction was a constant, reliable sensation against his soles. He was no longer thinking about the game. He was becoming a machine of habit. Every movement was stripped of wasted motion. His breathing synchronized with the tempo of his steps, a steady, controlled intake that matched the cadence of the ball hitting the floor. The sound of the bounce, the sharp friction of the turn, and the soft swish of the net were the only things that existed in the world. He was building something, layer by layer, in the hollow silence of the midnight hour. The repetition was not a chore. It was the foundation. He was calibrating his own potential, one squeak at a time. The rhythm shifted. It was no longer about the flow of movement. It was about the endurance of the body. Marcus moved to the free throw line, his legs heavy, his focus narrowed to the iron rim. He began the cycle. 1 shot, 2 shots, 10. The lactic acid bloomed in his shoulders like fire. Every time he lifted his arms, the muscles screamed in protest, twitching under the strain of hundreds of repetitions. He ignored the fire. He reset his stance, aligned his fingers, and released. The ball hit the rim and rattled out. He did not curse. He did not pause. He retrieved the ball, his hands shaking from the exhaustion, and walked back to the line. His arms felt like lead weights tied to his torso, heavy and unresponsive, yet he forced them up again. Sweat stung his eyes, blurring the court, but he kept his gaze locked. His triceps burned with every arc of the ball. His breath came in ragged, shallow gasps that echoed off the cold rafters. He missed once, twice, then hit 5 in a row. The final shot left his fingertips. A perfect, high arc that dropped through the nylon with a soft, clean sound. He stood there for a moment, chest heaving, arms trembling at his sides, refusing to leave until the count was met. The sophomore season arrived with the familiar weight of the bench. Marcus sat at the very edge of the row. His weight shifted forward, watching the game unfold through the tangled limbs of his teammates. The arena was a roar of competing shouts, whistles, and the constant thud of the ball. But for him, the world was filtered through the distance between his seat and the scorer's table. Minutes bled into hours of inactivity. He kept his eyes on the court, tracking every defensive rotation and every missed assignment, his muscles coiled and ready despite the cold stillness of his position. Then, the flow of the game fractured. A foul, a timeout. The coach stood up, his face etched with the frustration of a stalled offense. He turned toward the bench, his gaze sweeping over the players. The noise of the crowd seemed to drop away into a high-pitched hum. The coach locked eyes with Marcus. A single, sharp gesture followed a point toward the floor, a command to rise. The static in Marcus's mind vanished, replaced by a sudden, electric clarity. He pushed himself up, the wood floor vibrating under his feet. He stepped toward the scorer's table, his heart hammering a rhythm against his ribs. The long, silent period of waiting had finally snapped. He was no longer a spectator. He was moving into the light of the game. The hardwood felt different under his feet, harder and more alive than it had from the sidelines. Marcus moved into the defensive transition, his focus locking onto the player in front of him. A pass sailed through the lane. He anticipated the trajectory, lunged, and tipped the ball, forcing a turnover. He recovered the loose ball, drove hard toward the basket, and finished with a clean layup. The roar of the crowd was a dull vibration compared to the clarity of his own heartbeat. 2 minutes later, he found space behind the perimeter. His teammate kicked the ball out and Marcus caught it in rhythm. He rose, released, and watched the ball snap through the center of the net. 4 points. 3 minutes. He retreated to the defensive end, his chest burning with a new kind of fire. This was not the empty intensity of practice. This was the validation he had been building toward for months. He had held his ground, executed the plays, and proved that the hours of solitary work were not wasted. The coach did not pull him immediately. Marcus stayed in, his eyes scanning the court, sensing every opening, every shift in momentum. He belonged here. The spark had caught, and the path forward suddenly felt like a direct line rather than a blind gamble. The final buzzer of the season was not a release. but a starting gun. Marcus did not head to the beaches or the parties that claimed his peers. He retreated to a basement room, a space without windows, where the air was thick with the scent of rubber and cooling metal. He turned the world off. The only light in the room came from the rhythmic flicker of a projector screen, casting grain-heavy footage of professional games against the concrete wall. He watched the same sequences until the patterns burned into his vision. Between the clips, he moved to the squat rack. He pushed until his muscles trembled and the iron plates rattled against the floor, each rep measured by the steady, mechanical hum of the film. He did not speak to anyone for weeks. He lived by the clock and the weight of the bar. The solitude was not a burden, it was a whetstone. He was stripping away every hesitation, every wasted movement, and every lingering doubt. By the time the summer heat peaked outside, Marcus was no longer the same player who had stepped onto the court months ago. He was a machine, calibrated for a singular purpose, waiting for the first day of training camp to unleash the work he had forged in the dark. The autumn air in the gym was sharp, but the repetition was effortless. Marcus caught the pass, rose, and released. The ball cleared the net before he even landed. It was automatic. His jump shot had moved past thought and into muscle memory. He did not look at the scoreboard or the clock. He only looked at the target. Then, the silence of the gym shifted. It was not the absence of sound, but the addition of a specific, rhythmic scratching. He glanced toward the bleachers. 3 figures sat in the shadows, their heads bent over notebooks, their pens moving in synchronized arcs. They did not cheer. They did not react to the baskets. They simply recorded every pivot, every missed rotation, and every drop of sweat. The atmosphere grew heavy, thick with the weight of invisible expectations. Marcus felt the air pull tight around his chest. Every missed shot carried the potential of a closed door, and every successful play felt like a tentative key turning in a lock. He took another pass, his focus narrowing until the rim was the only thing that existed in the world. He shot. The net snapped. The pen scratched again. He was no longer playing for the team or for the scoreboard. He was playing for a future that was being written in ink just a few yards away, and the judgment was unrelenting. The venue was a tomb of hushed voices and flickering screens. Marcus sat in the front row, his mother beside him, her hand resting firmly on his forearm. The air conditioning hummed, a low, constant vibration that seemed to match the thrumming in his own chest. He looked down at his lap, his palms damp, rubbing against the rough fabric of his trousers. Every movement felt magnified. The room was packed, yet he felt as if they were suspended in a vacuum, separated from the rest of the world by a thin, invisible barrier. He watched the massive screens hovering above the stage, their glow reflecting off the polished floor. Each second that ticked by felt like an hour. The silence between the presenters was agonizing, a physical pressure that pushed against his ribs. He did not look at the other prospects. He did not listen to the murmurs of the crowd. His entire existence had narrowed down to the steady, rhythmic pulse of his own blood in his ears. Beside him, his mother did not speak. She only held his arm, her grip tightening whenever the room went dark. They were waiting for a single word to break the tension of a lifetime. A single moment that would either validate every hour of isolation or leave it all in the dust. The broadcast feed glitched for a heartbeat, a stuttering image that mirrored the sudden, sharp skip in Marcus's pulse. Then, the screen stabilized. A name appeared in bold, high-contrast letters. It was his. The letters seemed to vibrate, burning themselves into his vision. The room, which had been a vacuum of silence only moments before, erupted. The sound was not a roar, but a physical force, a wall of noise that crashed against his ears. The air pressure in the room shifted instantly. He did not move at first. He simply stared at the screen, watching his own name repeat as if checking for a mistake. The weight of every early morning in the gym, every lonely hour on the court, and every drop of sweat he had shed in the dark suddenly dissolved. It did not vanish. It transformed. It became the foundation of this single, explosive second. He felt his lungs expand, pulling in air that finally tasted like victory. His mother's grip on his arm loosened, turning into a firm, steady push toward the future. The years of doubt were gone, burned away by the sheer velocity of this realization. He was no longer just a player waiting for a chance. He was the choice. The transition was absolute, a sudden, blinding clarity that turned the world upside down and locked it into place. Marcus pushed his chair back. The metal legs scraped sharply against the floor, a sound that cut through the ongoing applause. He turned to his mother. She stood immediately, her hands finding his shoulders to steady him. He leaned in, pulling her into a sharp, brief embrace. He felt the firm pressure of her hands against his back, a physical anchor connecting him to the years of work that had led to this room. He stepped away, his boots finding traction on the carpeted floor. The path to the stage was illuminated by bright, focused spotlights that turned the air ahead into a hazy, glowing corridor. He moved forward, his stride measured, eyes locked on the podium waiting at the end of the aisle. The noise of the crowd was a distant hum now, secondary to the sensation of the ground beneath his feet. Every step felt deliberate, the culmination of 1,000 solitary sessions in empty gyms. He reached the stairs, his hand finding the railing. The wood was smooth, cold, and solid. He began the ascent, leaving the seat behind. The transition was physical and final. He was moving from the spectator's perspective into the arena of his own ambition. The professional locker room hummed with a different frequency than any gym he had known. Teammates tossed heavy sets of keys onto benches, the metal clattering against wood with a deliberate, echoing weight. They spoke of custom vehicles, imported leather, and weekend getaways that cost more than a year of his childhood tuition. Marcus sat in his designated spot, his own gear packed neatly in a duffel bag that showed wear from the collegiate years. He watched as a teammate pulled out a smartphone, scrolling through listings for high-end sports cars, the screen's glow reflecting in the room's harsh overhead lighting. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the restless energy of men who had suddenly gained access to everything. Marcus gripped his water bottle, his knuckles white. He looked at his own hands, calloused and steady. While the room erupted in laughter over a new purchase, he stayed anchored to the bench. He saw the allure of the display, the way the others sought validation through objects. He tightened the straps of his bag, his focus shifting back to the practice schedule pinned on the wall. He chose the silence of the court over the noise of the showroom, keeping his gaze fixed on the work that remained. Marcus walked out of the locker room, away from the chatter of luxury and toward the quiet of an office suite downtown. He entered a room where the air was still and smelled of paper and ink. Across a heavy mahogany desk sat a man with a stack of tax documents and investment charts. Marcus placed his contract on the desk, the edges sharp and clean. He did not ask about high-performance vehicles or real estate in distant cities. Instead, he pointed to a ledger detailing long-term index funds and retirement growth. The advisor looked up, his pen hovering over a signature line. Marcus nodded, his expression devoid of hesitation. He watched as the advisor stamped the documents, the rhythmic thud of the seal marking a permanent change in his direction. He was building a wall between his current income and the fleeting appetites that consumed his peers. He took the folder, felt the weight of the paper in his grip, and walked out into the afternoon light. He had traded the immediate gratification of a showroom floor for the slow, compounding growth of his future. The decision was made, the files were locked in his briefcase, and his focus remained entirely on the horizon beyond his playing days. Back at his residence, the television screen in the common area flickered with the frantic sounds of a digital game. Laughter and shouting spilled into the hallway as his teammates maneuvered through virtual worlds. Marcus stepped into his room and closed the door, cutting the noise to a dull, muffled hum. He cleared his desk, pushing aside a stack of scouting reports to make room for a thick binder of market ledgers. The pages were dense with columns of interest rates, tax projections, and asset depreciation tables. He pulled a lamp closer, the light pooling on the crisp paper. While his teammates tracked their progress in a game, Marcus traced the movement of money across the global economy with the tip of a pen. He cross-referenced local commercial real estate trends against his own investment portfolio, noting the shifts in yield. His hand moved rhythmically, calculating, correcting, and refining his strategy. The intensity he once directed toward his jump shot now powered his analysis of business models. He did not look up when a teammate knocked, asking if he wanted to play. He simply turned the page, his eyes scanning the data, mapping out a future that existed far beyond the buzzer. He was learning the mechanics of a new game, one where the stakes were measured in long-term stability rather than points on a board. The hardwood floor of the arena caught the arena lights, reflecting a deep, polished glow that stretched across the center court. Marcus stood near the three-point line, his feet planted firmly. He was no longer the young man searching for bench time, but a veteran who commanded the space with a quiet, measured presence. He turned slowly, taking in the vast expanse of empty seats and the soaring rafters of the stadium. This venue was his office now, a place where he conducted business meetings between shooting sessions. He walked toward the mid-court logo, his steps echoing against the silence of the facility. The rhythm of his movement was deliberate, reflecting a decade of discipline. He paused, looking at the structural steel and the massive scoreboard suspended above, seeing the complexity of the arena not just as a stage, but as a masterpiece of logistics and planning. He checked his watch, feeling the weight of the day's schedule, then looked back at the rim. The net was pristine, untouched. He had built this life on a foundation of repetitive, unseen work, and now, standing in the heart of the arena he had helped fund, the results were tangible. He adjusted his stance, centered his balance, and felt the familiar, grounding energy of the court beneath him. A rhythmic thudding of a basketball echoed from the baseline. A young player, barely out of his teens, approached the center court. He stopped 10 feet away, holding his ball against his hip, his eyes darting from the championship banners hanging in the rafters down to the polished wood beneath their feet. He seemed to be searching for a physical marker, some hidden blueprint embedded in the floorboards that explained how Marcus had reached this level. The young player finally looked up, his expression a mix of ambition and uncertainty. He asked, "How did you know? How did you know you would actually make it this far?" The question hung in the air, sharper than the squeak of sneakers. Marcus stayed still. He looked at the young player, then back at the empty arena. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant hum of the ventilation system. Marcus shifted his weight, his hands resting at his sides. He did not look at the scoreboard, or the trophies behind the glass. He focused on the young player, his face unreadable, his posture steady. He was not just answering a question about basketball. He was preparing to distill a lifetime of solitary, grueling effort into a single truth. The air between them grew heavy with the gravity of the moment, as Marcus took a slow breath, grounding himself before speaking. Marcus raised his hand, pointing a single finger down at the hardwood. The motion was slow, deliberate, and final. "I never knew," he said. His voice was low, carrying across the empty arena without needing to be loud. He walked a few steps, his shoes making a sharp, rhythmic sound against the polished surface. He pointed again, this time to the empty free throw line where he had spent thousands of hours in total darkness. "Look at this floor," he continued. "There was no promise of a career here. No scouts, no fans, no evidence." He paced the length of the paint, his gaze fixed on the wood as if reading a history written in the wax and scuffs of the past. "I showed up every single day before the evidence appeared," he said. "Most people wait for the proof first. They want to see the contract, the lights, the trophy, or the bank account before they commit to the work. That is why they never reach the end." He stopped moving, his posture rigid, his eyes meeting the young players with a direct, piercing intensity. You do not build success by waiting for the result. You build it by showing up when the court is empty and the room is cold. The truth of his statement settled between them, heavy and undeniable, shifting the atmosphere of the entire stadium. Marcus watched the young player process the words, seeing the realization land. He did not wait for a response. He turned, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space, each stride measured and calm. Behind him, the young player stood frozen, looking at the same floorboards that had served as the foundation for everything. Marcus did not look back. He walked past the bench where he had spent his freshman year waiting for a chance. He passed the locker room entrance where he had once sat in silence, questioning his own path. The air grew cooler as he approached the heavy steel doors leading to the outside world. He reached the threshold and stopped, his hand resting on the metal push bar. He glanced over his shoulder once, catching the reflection of the rafters and the polished floor. He was just a room now, a space of wax and wood. The work was done. The legacy was not in the trophies or the fame, but in the thousands of hours he had spent when no one was watching. He pushed the door open. Daylight flooded the entryway, swallowing his silhouette. He stepped through, letting the door swing shut behind him with a final, definitive click. The arena was empty again, silent, waiting for the next person to arrive and start the work.